So instead of using a Bible story, which I often do, today I'm inspired by the Apology of Socrates, which is a great philosophical text from the Greek tradition. And in this text, the story is, I'm not going to go into the details because it's about 18 pages, single space, so it's pretty long. But Socrates is on trial, great philosopher, and he's being accused of false teachings, teaching of other gods that don't belong to the city of Athens, and corrupting the youth with these new ideas and different ways of thinking. And we don't get to hear all of the accusations against Socrates, but the dialogue starts with his defense of himself. And he says, part of his defense is, first of all, it's very sarcastic. A lot of scholars are, is he serious? Is he sarcastic? And if you have to ask, then, is someone being sarcastic? Yes, they are. So he says that, I'm not teaching anything false because I don't know anything at all. I'm not teaching anything at all. I am just simply talking to people and finding out that they don't know what they're talking about. And then he cites the Oracle of Delphi. He says, my friend went to the Oracle and asked, is anybody wiser than Socrates? And the Oracle said no. And he's like, well, let me explain what it means. No one is wiser than me because I alone know that I don't know. Everyone else thinks they know, but I understand that I don't know. Therefore, I'm wiser, which is very, very funny. And but there's a profound wisdom in this, and this has been an inspiration for me for many years. I had a high school teacher who used to teach us, I know only that I do not know. And she drove it into our heads. And I've remembered it for the last, 20 plus years. I also looked at the Psalm for today, the Psalm at the beginning of the season of Lent. And there's some resonances there with this theme of God teaching the humble and leading them, being humble, being open to truth, and being led. But sometimes the Psalms get a little heavy for me, especially with kind of like this mentality of, like in one of the verses, God instructs sinners in the way, which is true. I understand this. But sometimes I don't like to see myself quite as a sinner. It gets a little bit too heavy at times. And I don't really want to conjure up too judgmental of an image of God. Then I get too ashamed, and that doesn't really serve my life. Yet, there's a profound wisdom in the Psalm too, and a different energy. So one thing I've been reflecting in this theme of not knowing, I've been looking back on my faith journey. And because one of the ways we often think we know is when it comes to faith, we think we know about God, who God is, what God wants for our lives. And I look back and I've at times been guided by my faith, and at times I've been misguided by my faith. I'm not sure what the ratio really is there. And I want to be clear, it's not that God has misguided me, but I've at times misguided myself by my concept of God. And with, I think, just relying maybe too much on my own ideas and my own feelings and intuitions about what is right. And maybe just that mixture of saying, then this is what God wants, just kind of hardened it too much and led me to make more mistakes than if I held it a little more loosely. That's just a kind of global reflection. Which brings me to one of these teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, which I'd like to share, who had a lot of mystical teachings. And one of them, he says that the faith of a person is like a container filled with liquid. And the container is what each person designs. It's their interpretation, it's their understanding of God, of the world. And then God is in the fluid that fills the container. And sometimes it's very hard to differentiate between the container and the fluid. So if the container is filled with the fluid, you might not even know the difference, and so you think the container is the fluid. And this is part of how, in my own experience, faith has misguided me. And so above all else, there's beauty to that. There's a safeguard in that. Even if your container is kind of funky and weird, the fluid is still good. And even if it has holes in it, it doesn't stop the fluid from filling it necessarily. But above all else, I feel like the container needs to be open. If there's one thing we could do for that, our concept of the world, our concept of God, to make it really functional, keep it open. At least let the fluid come in. So this Lent, in that spirit, trying to be more open, I have decided to give up knowing. Because there's nothing that closes us off more than certainty. There's nothing that closes off more than being right. And I've had a blessing in the last few weeks. This insight has just bubbled up. I don't know where it really has come from, but I just had this little insight that I have never been right about anything. Now, it came in maybe part of a thought process. I think I've been looking at a lot of political discussions. I've been reflecting on my role and, my ideas and thinking, well, how could I see the other side? And now I've realized that I have never been right about anything, which on the one hand, don't think I'm beating up on myself. I'm not saying I'm an ingrate sinner that's just always stubbornly chosen the wrong thing or something like that. No, that's not it. It's just that I don't believe that it's in the nature of human beings as individuals or as communities or as societies that we can ever be right. And I'm always striving, but I'm thinking, well, maybe the best I've done is sometimes I've got like a B. I've got like 85% right. Sometimes I've got like a 90. Sometimes I've got like, a 40. Not good. I'm always trying, but I'm never right. And I've never been right. And I feel a little bit of a liberation with that. I feel a sense of openness. If I'm not right, then I'm much more open to learning something. And it takes some pressure off any action I do, even if I know, Ian, this is like your best intention of an action, yet there's some other misguided intention in there too. There's some mistake you're making. You're helping, but you're also harming somehow. You don't know how, but that's just the mix. It's just the mix of life. But as soon as I say that I'm right, if I say I'm right, then that sets up someone else to be wrong. Kind of just goes that way. So if I was going to be right, then someone else would have to be wrong. And more I'm learning is that right-wrong divide is a very unproductive creation. It's a big barrier, and it deadens learning. It creates ill feelings. It damages relationships. So if I need to be right, then I need you to be wrong, and then the container is closed, at least as pertaining to that relationship, the container of the mind, the container of the heart. No fluid's going to be flowing there. That's just, the door is shut. And I have to say, it could be hard for clergy, it could be hard for spiritual communities, because clergy are often set up as experts who know things. Let the clergy expert tell you who God is and what you should do with your life. Well, that sets up a right-wrong dynamic, sets up a lot of hypocrisy. We've all been disappointed by saying, wait, we thought the faith leader was perfect and right about all things, and then look at what they've done in their lives. It's unbelievable. Yet, that's kind of what happens when you start with an illusion. And so I've been thinking about that too. And that's another area of liberation, of not being an expert. One of my great mentors, Michael Harvey, who's taught and spoke to the community before, said, as a minister, try to be a facilitator. Take yourself out of the expert role. Don't create a sense of dependency that you're the expert and your community members don't know. Realize that you all know to some extent, and you're learning together, and you're in a creative process. And that's really one of the things I've come to see over the years. But maybe 8-10 years ago, I was much more entrapped within an expert mentality as clergy and caught in kind of an illusionary setup. And one of the reasons it doesn't work for someone like me to kind of say my faith is right, well, then makes what everyone else is supposed to shoehorn into it. No, the shape of our minds, the shape of our faiths, our spirituality is unique. Each person, just as unique as our bodies and our faces. So it is too with the shape of our mind, the shape of our hearts, the faith that we carry. It's completely unique, and there's really no right or wrong to it. Each person is beautiful in their own way, and that's just who we each are. And that's why I really value diversity in the community, and I value not having a situation where a certain set of beliefs is seen as right, because that just shuts down being connected with who we uniquely are. One thing I'm very excited about for our community is that we're stepping into the breach of division and conflict in our society and in our families, sometimes within ourselves. We've, come alive to a sense of vocation as peacemakers. Partly Hippolyte has inspired us, and partly just the need, I think, in our country for healing, because people are saying, well, we're so divided, it's incredibly dysfunctional. We can't do the most basic things to tend to the common good. So we're stepping in. And we've done this before because we've been involved with interfaith dialogue, we've been involved with anti-racism, we've been involved with environmentalism. And, now we're trying to bring people together who have diverse political views. And Ann Continelli has been one of the big inspirations. She said, kind of challenge the community to say, what can Common Street do about this? What can Common Street do about the divide we're experiencing? What kind of spiritual leadership could we bring to this problem to get people to really open up? And Anne's been, I have to say, she's probably inspired me to look at Socrates more, because she's been using the Socratic dialogue method on Facebook. Very brave. Asking questions and trying to have real conversations instead of like sniping back and forth. And instead of being right, she's being curious, which has been very inspiring. And there's one thing I've learned in all these different fields of activism and trying to make a difference in the world. One thing I've learned is that perfectionism and self-righteousness do not help the cause. It could be any of these causes, but the perfectionism and the self-righteousness is so strong, it's so intense, that it makes it difficult for people to stay in the space of trying to make a difference in the world. And I'll give you an analogy I've thought of, keeps coming to mind. For example, if your floor is a mess, let's say, because you've just had a bunch of friends over and you've been eating in the kitchen, whatever, there's a lot of pieces on the ground. You're going to sweep the floor and then mop it, okay, to get it really clean. And there will be a dramatic difference, the before and after of, the messy kitchen floor versus after sweeping and mopping. That's as good as it gets of cleaning your floor. Yet, there is dirt in the mop water. There's dirt in the mop water. Even if you changed it once midstream, even the final mopping, you have dirt in that water and you're spreading dirt all over your floor. And then I want you to look at that mop, and the mop is disgusting if you look very close. Maybe even if you've just changed the mop head, it's still gross. And you've been spreading that all over your floor. So you could get into that and totally sabotage yourself and be like, well, if I'm just spreading dirt around my floor, then what's the purpose of anything I've done? I haven't cleaned anything. I've just been spreading dirt everywhere and getting into every little cranny. So you could psych yourself out, and that's what perfectionism does, and that's what self-righteousness does. You're working for racial justice, and then you find out, even as much as I'm working for racial justice, and that's my intention, there's still dirt in the mop water. I still have racist ideas. And even when I went to do that, if I take the final analysis, look at the way I'm doing things, there's still going to be 5% of a racist intention in there. There's still going to be something in there. Or you're working to save the environment, and someone says, well, Bill McKibben loves to save the environment. He's a famous environmentalist, but look, he's driving everywhere. He's burning fossil fuels on his way to do it. It's like, yeah, there's going to be dirt in this mop water. And we have to be okay with that and not think it's because, we're wrong or bad. It's because this is how life is. And when we brought our climate resolution to town meeting, I believe it was Donna McKenzie, a town meeting member, she said, because people were nitpicking, there could be grammar mistakes in there. There could be a semicolon missing. There's all kinds of reasons you might want to shoot down something like that. But she said, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I thought, what a wise statement. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And let's accept that something can be good and not be perfect. And if there's any way for people to be good, we're going to have to accept that we're not perfect if we want to be okay with ourselves and okay with what we're doing. And so I've really embraced that piece of wisdom for myself and for a lot of what I do. Because on the one hand, I want to believe in myself. I want to be positive about what I'm doing. I also want to be frank that nothing I do is perfect. Nothing I do is right. I can't bear that pressure because then it just kind of closes me off to learning. It closes me off to improving. That's self-righteousness. I can't be wrong. I have to be perfect in this action. Well, then there's no room for improvement. And sometimes you need a big improvement. Sometimes you need a total shift, even if you thought what you were doing was absolutely right. So we need that openness. And, if we're doing something and we feel it's good, we should be able to celebrate. And we shouldn't have to be not only scrutinizing ourselves too closely in a destructive way, but also to other people. And we don't have to be looking at someone else and saying, there's dirt in your mop water and everything you've done is useless. We have to kind of step back sometimes and see, well, what's the big picture and has there been an improvement? And then we can celebrate that and we could be okay with who we are. And so, no pressure for anyone else, but I'm giving up knowing for Lent. It's going to be a fun adventure. I'm going to be more open-minded. I will still answer simple questions like how to put an event on the website. I will not be crazy with you like, oh, I don't know. But I'm trying to open my mind. I'm going to try to know less and embrace learning, embrace what other people are telling me, to try to learn and to try to grow. And that's a lot of the spirit I want to experiment with the Common Threads discussions. I want to embrace not knowing when I'm talking to someone who I don't necessarily agree with politically, but not know that they're wrong. I don't need to know that they're wrong or they're bad. Maybe I don't need to know that. I could be open. I could let them come in. And I don't need to know necessarily, what God wants when it comes to faith. I could be open. I don't know. And I think there's more power for me in that. So that is my message. And thank you all for being here and listening. And we'll take a moment now for reflection. We'll take a moment for each person to be with their own truth. And then we'll have what we call the sharing of the wisdom of the community, which is a time for anyone to express themselves if they are moved with the truth that they feel like this will benefit the whole community.